In this fantasy football video, we'll be going over some overvalued players, some players that I think are going a bit too high for their ADP, and some players that I think will be flat out bust in 2020. So at first we did some breakout players for this year, league winners. That was my first video. Then we did sleeper picks, so that was another video, and now the third one will be the overvalued. I have another fantasy video coming out for you guys, hopefully the next couple days, for bold predictions. I might have one of my friends on here for that, so stay tuned. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and leave in the comments who you think an overvalued player is this year. You can leave multiple as well, but hopefully you enjoyed this video, and let's get into it. Number one, we have Melvin Gordon, the running back for the Denver Broncos now. So him going to Denver didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Now he's the 29th overall player going in fantasy, which I feel is way too high. So Gordon in the past has battled some injuries throughout his career, including some knee injuries. He's had a hamstring injury in 2018, caused him to miss a couple games. So I definitely think he's a health risk. But on top of that, you talk about the competition in his backfield. There's a guy named Phillip Lindsay, the undrafted free agent, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and there's a guy, Royce Freeman, behind him, who I also like. So, Royce Freeman's not the biggest concern, but he's a guy I'm a fan of. And, of course, Phillip Lindsay's a guy that's going to be still involved as well. So I don't know how many touches, what kind of volume Melvin Gordon will get. I don't really trust him from an injury standpoint and staying healthy. I'm not really sure about this fit, honestly. So if the Broncos offense is as good as I think it is, obviously it could work out, but Melvin Gordon might be the type of guy that you're just going to rely on to score some touchdowns. And if you're relying on touchdowns in fantasy, that's probably not a good thing. I want to bank on the volume. So there's players going around Gordon like Chris Carson, James Conner, and Mark Ingram. I would take those guys over Gordon for sure. That's just my opinion, but I'm definitely going to avoid Melvin Gordon in the third round this year. Next, we have wide receiver DK Metcalf. So when I was looking at the average draft positions today, my jaw honestly dropped. He's the 14th wide receiver off the board, which is pretty crazy. That's almost a wide receiver one, 2 spots away. So there is a guy, Tyler Lockett, that's still in that offense and still is the wide receiver one, in my opinion at least. And I cannot remember the last time the Seahawks employed 2 wide receiver twos in their offense, or wide receiver twos and better. I can't remember the last time that happened. I mean, Doug Baldwin was the guy there for a while. Maybe we're going back to like the Sidney Rice days. I don't even know. It's been a long time since they've had 2 receivers there that really stood out. I know last year you can argue for sure Metcalf had 900 yards, Lockett had 1,000 yards, but when you're drafting DK Metcalf to be the 14th wide receiver off the board, you're not drafting him to get 900 receiving yards. You're probably looking for more of a 1,200 yard type of thing, which could happen. But look, I mean, the Seahawks offense, they have finished top 3 in the NFL the past 2 seasons since 2018 when Brian Schottenheimer took over as their offensive coordinator. We know they love to run the ball. They've been top 3 in the NFL in both years in rushing attempts. So, of course, the volume won't be there. I was against Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett last year because I didn't think that it was sustainable for the crazy amount of efficiency they had. They proved me wrong, but now you're fitting another guy in here in DK Metcalf. How crazy does this get here? The passing attempts aren't there, and Lockett had 110 targets last year to Metcalf's 100, and while Metcalf will have his games where he pops off for sure, there's guys going after him I'd much rather have, like Adam Thielen, Odell Beckham, Allen Robinson, Robert Woods. Give me those guys over DK Metcalf any day. It's too risky for me. I mean, Metcalf could prove me wrong. He has a talent for it. I just don't think the volume's going to be there, and there's better options after him, in my opinion. Next, we have running back Raheem Mostert with the San Francisco 49ers. So Mostert was amazing in the playoffs last year. I can admit that. If he did what he did in the Packers game every week, he'd be the running back 1, but that's probably not going to happen. So right now, he's the running back 26 off the board, and we know Kyle Shanahan, he has enough of a track record at this point. He's one of those coaches that wants to use this running back by committee, which we all don't like as fantasy owners, and last year the Niners basically had 3 running backs. They had Tevin Coleman, they had Mostert, and they had Matt Breida. I know Breida was injured for a few games, but still, he used basically 3 people, and even when Breida was out, they used Jeff Wilson Jr., so they had another guy in there. Like, he wants to rotate 3 running backs. That's too much for me to take at number 26 overall for a running back. So there's really no back on the there was no back at all on the Niners roster last year that had over 140 carries. So if we're spending the 26th running back pick for a guy that's probably not going to get over 150 carries, that's a little too rich for me in my opinion. So we're just banking on him getting in the end zone and just having like these overwhelming efficient games where he's averaging like 6 yards per carry and scoring a couple touchdowns. Like there's no way someone can do that over a full season. The volume's not going to be there for Mostert. I think Mostert is a pretty good running back, especially he's in the greatest system for running backs right now in the 49ers system. If you can draft the 49ers backfield, I would definitely take that any day of the week. But unfortunately in fantasy football, you're playing with individual players, and if you're splitting the time up between 3 people in Shanahan's offense, I just don't see how it's going to be useful. So, I mean, there's Jerick McKinnon's going to join this team as well, we think. He hasn't been healthy the past 2 years, but now we're looking at a backfield that's going to have Coleman, and then we have McKinnon, and then of course there's Mostert. So 3 guys right there. You don't want to divide up all that fantasy value. You can't use one backfield. I'm avoiding Mostert. I don't want him at 26. If I can get him later, sure, maybe some injuries happen to the guys around him, but still, at the end of the day, the Niners want to use multiple running backs, and that's not what I want on my fantasy team. Next, we have Kareem Hunt, and if you watched my videos last year, you probably think I hate Kareem Hunt. I actually like him from a talent standpoint, but last year it was easy because he was suspended for 8 games, and people were still taking him in like the 8th or 9th round, which I thought was crazy, but this time he's not suspended. Hopefully he plays every game for his sake. He's the running back 27 right now, but there's still guys that are starting going behind him, like Ronald Jones, Cam Akers. I'm not the biggest Ronald Jones guy from a talent standpoint. I like Cam Akers, but at least Ronald Jones is the starting running back on a good team. Kareem Hunt's not even the starter on his team. I know Kareem Hunt can work as a slot receiver at times and can get some volume through the passing game. I know Kevin Stefanski likes to run the ball a lot, but Kareem Hunt's best case scenario is basically Alexander Mattison. And Alexander Mattison, he had his games last year where he would go 6 carries, 48 yards, and a touchdown and get lucky breaking off a big run. But Kareem Hunt's volume, if Nick Chubb is healthy, is not sustainable to start in your lineup every week. If you want to play that game, be my guest. I mean, hopefully you play in my league, but I don't want to put Kareem Hunt in my lineup every week with that kind of volume. I mean, at best case scenario, he's getting 10 carries, 5 targets. I mean, it can't get much better than that if Nick Chubb's on the field. I know Chubb got a concussion. He should be fine. He should be there week 1. He's been healthy in the NFL so far, thankfully for him, but I just don't want to trust Kareem Hunt, especially as like a running back 2. He's going at running back 27. That's basically a running back 2 or close to it. So, I like this guy from a talent standpoint, and if he went to a different team and was a starter, I'd probably be all in on Kareem Hunt, but this situation right now, not a big fan of it. I'm probably going to have to pass on him in my drafts. Next, we have Devante Parker. This one kind of hurts because I like Devante Parker. I was happy for him that he broke out last year. He was basically a bust for 4 years and finally had that breakout year in 2019. So right now, he's the wide receiver 30 on Fantasy Football Calculator. And wide receiver 30 is not that bad of a price, but I feel like on other sites he's going higher. Like I play a lot on Yahoo, and I feel like he's going a lot higher on Yahoo. I could be wrong, but I feel like I've seen him higher. But my main problem with him is who's the quarterback for the Dolphins right now? It could be 3 people for all we know. His best games and the best part of his season was with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Of course, him and Josh Rosen didn't really gel. He didn't play many games anyway. Tua Tagovailoa comes in here as a draft pick. We have no idea how he's going to mesh with Devante Parker. So his best games were with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And Fitzpatrick's going to take some risk. He'll just chuck it up deep, 50-50 ball, let Devante Parker come down with it. But we don't know. If you told me right now Fitzpatrick was the starter for 16 games, I'd be a lot higher on Devante Parker. But if they're doing like this quarterback carousel thing, I don't know if I can trust that situation. So Tua might come in. He might be timid at first and not want to take chances, which can hurt Devante Parker. They could put Josh Rosen in. They didn't have a connection last year. And I like the Ryan Fitzpatrick connection, but like how long is that going to last? I mean, we have no idea. Fitzpatrick, we've seen it time and time again. He'll go to a team, be really good on that team in the first year, and then kind of overstay his welcome in the second year and not play as well. So that's really how his career's gone from the Jets to Tampa Bay and wherever else he's been. So I'm concerned about that. Also, he's had some injuries in his career, Devante Parker. So he's had 4 foot and ankle injuries since 2014, including a foot fracture in 2014. Then there was a quad strain in 2018. He missed 5 games that year. And then some hamstring issues in the 2016 preseason. So it's not like this guy is completely free of injury. He's a bit injury prone. It's not like the biggest concern in the world, but something to keep in the back of your mind. But, for me to just all of a sudden buy into Devante Parker and forget about the first 4 years of his career, I don't know if I can do that. Maybe that's just me being a pessimist, but, he's had 4 years in the league, didn't live up to his potential. He does it for 1 year. Who says he can do it twice in a row? I just don't know if I trust the quarterback situation. He could be really good. I could, be eating crow by the end of the year, but I just don't love his situation, and I don't like knowing that Fitzpatrick might not be his quarterback for a full season. Next, we have Ben Roethlisberger. So Roethlisberger was a guy I was all over last year. He came off a great 2018 season, had a bunch of passing attempts, but that's really my main issue here. So I'm not one of those people that think Roethlisberger's done. I feel like he'll come back, he'll be fine from the injury. I just don't think he's going to pass the ball nearly as much as he used to. And the biggest thing for Roethlisberger back in like 2017, 2018 was the amount of passing attempts this guy got. And his fantasy volume was unbelievable. So in 2018, he had a staggering 675 passing attempts, which led the NFL that year, but I don't see that going anywhere near that in 2020. The Steelers team as a whole looks a lot different. Their defense now is top 5, I would argue top 3 in the NFL, and they have a healthy James Conner. Hopefully, we'll see if that lasts, and I just don't see them airing out the ball 50, 60 times a game anymore. I think they're going to rely on their running backs and try to be more of a, let's run the ball and pass the ball an even amount of times type of team. Maybe I'm reading the situation wrong here, but Roethlisberger can still be efficient and put up good numbers. He just won't have the crazy amount of passing attempts, which is my number one thing with him. So he won't have that crazy volume of 600 passes or more, in my opinion. He did have Antonio Brown back in 2018. That definitely helps a lot. We're not sure if Juju Smith-Schuster is an actual wide receiver 1 yet. I think he could do it, but I think if he had another guy alongside him with a similar skill set, it would help him a lot. Hopefully a Deontay Johnson, a James Washington, or a Chase Claypool can step up for him, but we'll have to wait and see. But, guys going behind him like Cam Newton, Ryan Tannehill, I'd rather have them more than Ben Roethlisberger. I think Roethlisberger can still put up a pretty good year efficiency-wise. He might toss for 30 touchdowns still, but you're banking on him being very efficient as compared to just having all the volume. So that's a little concerning for me. He's coming off major elbow surgery, 38 years old. That's another thing to keep in your mind. As I said, I think he'll bounce back. I just don't think the passing attempts will be there like they were in years past. Next, we have J.K. Dobbins, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. So Dobbins was a second-round pick in the real NFL draft this past April. He's the running back 32 off the boards right now. So look, if you're in a redraft league, I would avoid him. If you're in a dynasty league, I would take him. I like his future outlook. I just don't like his outlook for this year specifically. Now, I know running back 32 is not a crazy cost, but there are some sites where he's going really high. I know Yahoo is one of them. So the price tag isn't outrageous, but I don't see him playing as much as people think he'll play this year. We can't forget that Mark Ingram is still there. Mark Ingram, they're paying him more. He had 5 yards per carry last year. His downhill style just perfectly complemented Lamar Jackson. He had 15 total touchdowns. He was unbelievable for that team and showed no signs of slowing down. I know Mark Ingram's like 30 years old now, but he has not shown any signs of slowing down. Now, as I said, I like Dobbins from a dynasty perspective, but if you're in a redraft 1 year type of league, I'm not taking him at running back number 32. If he falls in the draft, sure. If Mark Ingram got hurt, he could be one of the greatest values in fantasy, but I don't plan on Mark Ingram getting hurt. I think he'll be fine. I think Dobbins will fill in for like that Gus Edwards type of role where he might get 6 to 8 carries per game and see what he can do. He might break off a big run here and there. He might steal a touchdown here and there. But just like I said for Kareem Hunt, I can't start him in my lineup every week. If you want to keep him on the bench, I guess that's all right. But I'm not going to start J.K. Dobbins probably at any point. So I would take guys that he's going over. I would take Cam Akers. I would take the elite handcuffs like the Madisons, Tony Pollard. I would take Latavius Murray. I would take all those guys over a guy like J.K. Dobbins instead. That's just my opinion. Obviously, if Ingram went down, this can be a very wrong take, but I just think as long as Ingram's there, he's still the starter, and Dobbins will not see enough of a workload to be a starting running back. Next, we have Devin Singletary. So just like Ben Roethlisberger, I was huge on Singletary last year. I love his draft price and I love the opportunity, but I'm not really on his side for 2020. So I did see him falling a lot in drafts this year. I think he was like a 4th round pick at one point. He's now fell to like the 7th round. So the biggest thing is really the Bills took Zach Moss in the 3rd round. I'm a big Zach Moss fan. I liked him a lot in college watching his highlights. He looked really good. And he's like a typical early down runner, was really good at Utah as well. I think had like over 4,000 career yards there. So while I do believe Singletary will get some early down work, it's not his backfield only. That was like the big thing. So once Frank Gore left, people probably thought, oh, well, Devin Singletary is the starting running back now, no competition. But then they draft Zach Moss, and all of a sudden you have like this 50-50 split potentially. So another problem is he's had 4 fumbles last season, and there's more reports coming out in this preseason or this training camp that he's also having some fumbling issues. So if he's fumbling the ball, he's not going to see the field. So we have to put that in there as well. Right now, he is the running back number 24. To me, it's a bit too high. If I can get him later, like more in like the 10th, 11th round, of course I would take him, but I'm not taking him in like the 6th to 8th round where he's usually going. So I just don't think he has the upside. Zach Moss there hurts him a lot. I think it's more of a split backfield in my opinion. Moss is more of a goal line back type of build. He'll probably steal some touchdowns, and Singletary might be a between the 20s type of guy, which you hate for fantasy. He's probably a bit of a better receiver than Moss, but even Moss isn't that bad as a receiver, so we'll have to see. But I just don't like Singletary's upside for this year. I know his draft prices fell, but even 6th to 8th round, I would still not take him there. Next, we have tight end Darren Waller. So Waller was a breakout player in 2019. Really good story. I'm happy for him, but I think his circumstances will be different in 2020. So honestly, the perfect connection I can make here is Jared Cook back in 2018. So when Jared Cook, the tight end, was on the Oakland Raiders, he was like the only target in town. The next guy in targets was Jordy Nelson. Cook had 101 targets that year. Nelson had 88. Jordy Nelson could not move that well at that point in his career. Then last year for the Raiders, Darren Waller had 117 targets, while the next guy, Hunter Renfrow, who I think might have missed some games last year as well, he had 71 targets compared to his 117. So being the only target in town and having that volume will definitely help your fantasy value, and I think that's where Darren Waller benefited from last year. Obviously, he was a great player. I'm not saying he's not, but the volume and the targets definitely helps a lot. So now at wide receiver, the Raiders add Henry Ruggs in the draft in the first round. Bryan Edwards is a guy I liked a lot. Has had some injury concerns, but Bryan Edwards is a great talent in my opinion. And they also add Nelson Aguilar. He's not the biggest threat in the world, but still they added him. So I don't think that Darren Waller is going to have this crazy target share in the offense. Now last year, he was the number 3 tight end. I still think Waller's a top 10 tight end, but I just don't think he'll be like a top 3, even top 5 guy. I see him more as a number 5 to 10 tight end this year, so I would not go crazy reaching on him. I wouldn't look at his numbers last year and assume he'll do the same thing again. Obviously, he has the talent for it, but when you look at the surrounding people on his team and the more targets there is, I think his targets might drop in 2020. Next, we have quarterback Josh Allen. This was another guy I was a huge fan of last year. I believe he was in my sleepers video. Had a nice season. He returned on investment. He was quarterback number 6 last year. I just don't see him doing that again. So one of the biggest advantages to having Josh Allen in fantasy is his rushing upside, his rushing ability, and the amount of times he'll take off with the ball. So it came out a couple days ago, honestly, that he is not going to run the ball as much this year. He says he doesn't want to do it. He wants to get the ball in his playmakers' hands. Of course, they brought in Stephon Diggs. They have John Brown. Cole Beasley's there still. He wants to get the ball in his playmakers' hands. That kind of concerns me. When you're taking away his rushing upside from a fantasy perspective, that's going to hurt a lot. It'll probably make him a better real-life quarterback, but as we know in fantasy football, 25 passing yards is 1 point, 10 rushing yards is 1 point. We want you to rush the ball as a quarterback. It helps a lot. So if you take away his rushing touchdowns, that's also less points, 6 points compared to 4 for a passing touchdown. That's not good for your fantasy numbers. And right now he's the quarterback 9. He's still in front of guys like Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz. I would take them over Josh Allen for sure in 2020. I'm not saying Josh Allen can't be a good passer, but we know he's not the most accurate guy out there. So if he's relying on his arm to make things happen, I just don't see it for him. He's a guy that barely had over 3,000 yards last year, I believe. He's not the greatest passer in the world. I mean, he has the talent for it for sure. I just don't know if he'll do it. So I'm going to avoid him this year. He could prove me wrong, obviously. I'm fine being wrong on that. I'll take Matt Ryan. I'll take Carson Wentz. I'll take Ryan Tannehill a bunch of rounds later over a guy like Josh Allen this year. Up next, we have a pair of Dolphins running backs, Matt Breida and Jordan Howard. So for Matt Breida, he was traded from the Niners to the Dolphins, which is kind of funny because he literally went from the best running back situation to possibly the worst in the NFL. So last year, Breida was 3rd in the NFL in yards before contact, which basically tells you how great your offensive line and your system is. His teammate Raheem Mostert was 2nd place. Lamar Jackson as a quarterback was number 1. I think Tevin Coleman, another Niners running back, was 10th overall as well. So that's a stat the Niners were very good at, and it made their running backs' jobs a lot easier. So the Dolphins have significantly worse offensive line play calling, and weapons as compared to San Francisco, and it's hard seeing Breida being consistently good in 2020. And as I'm going to say for Jordan Howard and vice versa, their workload is going to eat into each other. Jordan Howard's going to play and Matt Breida is going to play. They can't split the football in half, obviously. Some guys, sometimes they're going to be on the field while the other's on the bench, and as I said, vice versa. So for Jordan Howard, you could probably see this one coming. Howard's his fantasy relevance is definitely going to be dependent on his volume. He was all right for Philadelphia last year. He was really good on the Bears because he was getting a lot of carries per game. Now he goes to a situation where it's hard to break off big plays behind this offensive line, and Jordan Howard's not even that big of a big play guy anyway. He's not the best receiver, and you're really just relying on him to get into the end zone. He'll probably get all the goal line work, which is great, but how many times will the Dolphins be on the goal line? We have to ask ourselves that question too. But as I mentioned, their offensive line is brutal. He'll split time with Matt Breida. I'm just completely avoiding the Dolphins running backs in 2020. I'm fine being wrong about that one. You guys can have them. Completely fine with it. Don't want Howard, don't want Breida in 2020. Next, we have Adrian Peterson, running back for the Washington football team. So I joked about this on Twitter. Darius Geis continues to give Adrian Peterson opportunities to be a starting running back. I mean, whether it's due to injury or off the field stuff, Darius Geis continues to give Adrian Peterson more of a chance here. And 2020 is no different. So Peterson is the running back 49, which is really low, and you're probably like, why do you care about him being overvalued? It's really not that bad. But to me, he's basically a waste of a draft pick. This is the same situation that people did with Frank Gore the past 2 years. Taking Frank Gore to me is a waste of a pick. He's never going to be that great at this point in his career. Adrian Peterson is now 35 years old. He is 2 years removed from 1,000 yards. I think he had like 800 yards last year, which is fine, but you're not going to start Adrian Peterson every week and get consistently good results. So, there's more running backs there, by the way. They got Bryce Love. They do have a guy in Antonio Gibson who's very exciting out of Memphis, who is the running back / wide receiver. He'll probably get some work in both, honestly, but Bryce Love can't be ignored. He's in year 2 now. There's a new regime there, new coach, obviously, so you have to watch out for that. And sure, Peterson might get 12 to 16 carries per game to start out the season, but once they realize that he's ineffective and not good, they're probably going to bench him for one of the younger guys. I'm just being honest. So I would rather take, obviously Gibson's a lot earlier in the draft. I would rather take Bryce Love. I'm not exactly sure where he's going. I could try and take a look real quick if I can find him, but I'm assuming he's going number 59 right now. So he's running back 59. Adrian Peterson's number 49. Give me Bryce Love over Adrian Peterson any day. It's really not even close to me. Give me that upside of the younger guy, the unproven guy. We know what Peterson is. Great career, Hall of Famer. I don't want him in 2020 if I'm being honest. Up next, we have Sony Michel. He was actually in my players to avoid video last year, so I got that one right, thank God. But Sony Michel, you can kind of see the writing on the wall there. He had a bunch of knee injuries. I think going back to college even, he had knee surgery, I think, last year. He now had some type of knee surgery in June. I mean, the guy's got a bunch of injuries. I feel bad for him, honestly, and he's definitely behind the 8 ball this year because he's already not at training camp. He's not at the preseason, so that's going to hurt him a lot. And last year, Michel was given 247 carries and still wasn't able to get 1,000 yards. I think he had 900 yards last year. He had 3.7 yards per carry. Pretty ineffective. Now, last year he had a longer leash. He was a former first-round pick. The year before, he just carried them in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. Won a Super Bowl for them, basically, on offense. So he was great. Had a longer leash. But now, this is 2 years removed from that. And I think this year, there's a guy in Damian Harris who I talked about in my sleeper video, I think it was. He has him breathing down his neck. Rex Burkhead might still be there. We know James White's going to be there. And, Sony right now is number 33 for running backs. So I wouldn't take him there. I wouldn't take him at all, honestly. He's a guy who I think might be a flat-out bust, and that is saying something for me. I consider a bust someone that's like outside the top 200. I think Sony Michel might be a guy that misses a lot of games due to injury or just is not effective, and they play somebody else over him. I think Damian Harris has that best shot, which is why I'm high on him. So we'll see how it goes. I could be wrong about Michel. He's good when he's healthy. I just don't think he'll be healthy anytime soon. The guy has really bad knees, as we know, and I just don't see him being a useful fantasy option in 2020. So that'll do it for this video. I know I put a lot of names out there. Some are bound to be wrong, but hopefully most of these guys are right. There's some I feel better about than others, but for a guy like Sony Michel, I don't see a scenario where he's going to be good this year. But once again, let me know in the comments who you think the overvalued or bust are for this year. Maybe you go higher than me. I didn't really choose any of the top 10 guys because that's, I think the highest guy I have is Melvin Gordon. He was number 29 overall, but still, you don't want to waste your 3rd round pick, so it makes sense. But thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.